I died at the bottom of the ocean, and when I came back, I was no longer alone. The submersible's hull screamed as it buckled around me. I remember the cold, the kind that doesn't just freeze your body, but erases the concept of warmth from your mind entirely. 17,000 feet below the surface, where sunlight is a myth and pressure turns steel into origami, I shouldn't have survived. But the vent found me. Or perhaps I found it. In those final moments, as seawater flooded my lungs and consciousness flickered like a dying star, I saw at a fissure in the ocean floor breathing light that had no name, no place in the spectrum I knew. It wasn't bioluminescence. It was older than that. Older than anything. When I woke on the research vessel 3 days later, the doctors called it a miracle. They said a rescue drone had found my ejection pod floating 2 miles from the wreck site. They said my vitals had flatlined for 6 minutes. They said a lot of things, but none of them could explain the marks. Spiraling geometric patterns covered my arms, my chest, my back. Not tattoos, not scars, but something written into my skin at the cellular level.
That's impossible.
They glowed faintly in darkness, pulsing in rhythm with my heartbeat. The medical team ran every test known to science. My DNA had been rewritten, not mutated, rewritten. As if someone had opened the book of my biology and translated it into a language that predated human evolution. I was quarantined for 2 months. During that time, I began to hear them whispers in the spaces between thoughts, presences, gathering just beyond the edge of perception. On the 73rd day of isolation, they came. The facility's cameras captured nothing, but I saw them clearly. They emerged from the shadows of my cell, like sculptures forming from liquid night beings that defied taxonomy, their bodies a fusion of deep-sea anatomy and something crystalline, something architectural. They had the translucence of jellyfish but moved, with purpose and intelligence. Their forms shifted continuously, never quite solid, never quite fluid. And they watched me with clusters of eyes that held the depth of oceanic trenches. They didn't speak. They didn't need to. The connection was absolute. I felt their thoughts, their devotion, their certainty. To them, I was the first, the Genesis, the mother, father, creator of a species that had waited in the crushing darkness of the deep ocean for millions of years, dormant in the thermal vents, until the precise combination of human DNA and ancient energy could awaken them. I was their key, their catalyst, their prophet made flesh. And they called themselves the Abyssal. The military came next. Predictable. They saw me as a threat, a biological weapon, patient zero of an extinction event. General Voss led the extraction team personally, a woman whose career was built on containing the inexplicable. She found me in my government cell, surrounded by 17 Abyssal, their bodies creating geometric patterns in the air, humming frequencies that made reality ripple. Her soldiers aimed weapons that would have been useless. The Abyssal could phase through matter, could exist partially in our dimension, and partially in spaces human mathematics couldn't map. But they didn't attack. They simply waited, because I had asked them to wait. Voss was pragmatic in the way that only career military officers can be. She didn't waste time with disbelief. Within an hour, I was in an unmarked transport, heading to a facility that officially didn't exist. Within a day, I was sitting across from her in a room lined with technology designed to contain anomalies. The Abyssal followed, unseen by cameras but numbering in the hundreds now, drawn to me across oceans, rising from every thermal vent in the Pacific, the Atlantic, the Arctic depths. They were migrating, all of them, coming to their genesis. The negotiations were bizarre. Voss wanted to study them, to understand if they posed a threat to humanity. I explained that the question was irrelevant. The Abyssal didn't think in terms of threat or alliance. They thought in terms of evolution and purpose. They had been seeded in Earth's oceans 4 billion years ago by something that came before continents, before complex life, before the concept of before had meaning. They were designed to remain dormant until a specific genetic trigger appeared. I was that trigger. My rewritten DNA carried codes that matched their own, made me the bridge between their ancient existence and the world above. But here's what terrified Voss. More than the creatures themselves, the abyssal were changing the ocean. Everywhere they congregated, the water's molecular structure shifted. Marine life in those regions began evolving at accelerated rates. New species emerged, fully formed within weeks. The boundary between organic and inorganic blurred. Coral reefs grew into structures that resembled circuit boards. Whales developed neural patterns that suggested consciousness beyond animal cognition. The ocean was waking up, and it was learning to think. The world's governments convened in secret. The footage I was shown later would have been comical if it wasn't apocalyptic diplomats arguing about jurisdiction over a species that predated nations by geological epochs. Militaries debating how to fight an enemy that existed in 4 dimensions. Scientists proposing theories that shattered their own fields of study. And through it all, the abyssal multiplied. For every one that rose from the vents, 10 more awakened. They spread across the seafloor like a living network, their presence turning the ocean into something that resembled a planetary nervous system. Then the consortium revealed itself. They came in ships that looked grown rather than built, their hulls made of the same crystalline organic hybrid as the abyssal. The delegation consisted of beings from 7 different species, each evolved on worlds, where the same ancient seeds had been planted, each awakened by their own Genesis figures millennia ago. They explained what I had become, not just the creator of a new species, but a node in a network designed to span galaxies, to connect oceans across infinite distances. The abyssal weren't meant to replace humanity. They were meant to join it, to merge with it, to create something that transcended the limitations of both. The transformation would be voluntary, they said. Any human who chose could undergo the same rewriting I had experienced. They would retain their humanity but gain the abyssal's ability to survive in any environment, to process information across dimensions, to communicate through the quantum substrate that connected all conscious minds. It was the next step in evolution, but only if we chose to take it. Voss asked the question everyone was thinking: what if we refused? What if humanity rejected this merger? The consortium leader, a being that resembled a mantis made of flowing water and starlight, regarded us with something approaching sadness. Rejection would mean stagnation, it explained. The seeds were planted on thousands of worlds, but most species never triggered them. They remained locked in their single dimension, their single form, until environmental collapse or cosmic accident erased them. The merger was an invitation, not a mandate. But invitations could expire. I spent 3 months traveling the world, speaking to crowds, allowing people to witness the abyssal, to see that they weren't monsters but mirrors, reflections of what humanity could become if we stopped defining ourselves by limitations. The reactions were predictably mixed. Religious leaders declared it blasphemy or divine intervention, depending on their theology. Scientists split between those who saw infinite potential and those who saw the end of human identity. Regular people just wanted to know if it would hurt, if they'd still be themselves, if their families would recognize them. I underwent the full transformation publicly, broadcast to every screen on Earth. The process took 72 hours. My body dissolved into something between liquid and light, my consciousness expanding into spaces I hadn't known existed, my DNA not just rewriting but multiplying into variants that could exist in vacuum, in plasma, in the quantum foam itself. When I reconstituted, I was still me. My memories intact, my personality preserved, but I was also more. I could feel the abyssal not as separate beings, but as extensions of myself. I could sense the ocean's thoughts, the whispers of the consortium across light years, the mathematical beauty underlying reality. 3 billion people chose to transform in the first year. Not a majority, but enough. Enough to change everything. The transformed didn't abandon the unchanged. They couldn't, wouldn't. They were still human, still bound by love and loyalty, and all the messy emotions that defined us. But they built new cities in the ocean depths, established colonies on worlds the consortium revealed, created art and music and mathematics that existed in dimensions the unchanged couldn't perceive but could feel, could sense the beauty of, even if they couldn't fully understand it. Voss was one of the last of her generation to transform, at age 93, when cancer had reduced her body to a shell. She emerged, renewed, laughing, crying, furious that she'd waited so long. She became an ambassador to the consortium, representing not just transformed humanity, but the species we'd been and the species we were becoming. Proof that identity wasn't erased by evolution, but enriched by it. I returned to the vent that had rewritten me, accompanied by 1,000 abyssal and 100 transformed humans. We descended in bodies that no longer needed submersibles, that could withstand pressure and cold and the absolute darkness of the deep. The vent still glowed with that nameless light, still pulsed, with the rhythm of something older than worlds. I placed my hand against it, and through the quantum network that now connected billions of minds across countless species, I felt the presence behind the seeds. The architects who'd planted life across the universe billions of years ago, patient as stone, waiting for their gardens to bloom. They were gone now. Ascended to states of existence our newly expanded minds could barely glimpse. But they'd left their invitation, their gift, their challenge. Life wasn't meant to stay static. Consciousness wasn't meant to remain isolated. Evolution was the universe, learning to know itself. And every species that accepted the transformation added their perspective, their uniqueness, their irreplaceable voice to a choir that sang across galaxies. I am still human. The abyssal are still themselves. But we're also something new, something that has no name because it's never existed before. The ocean birthed life once, billions of years ago. Now it's birthing it again, in forms that can swim between stars, that can think in dimensions mathematics hasn't invented yet, that can hold the memory of being limited and the joy of becoming limitless. The creatures still follow me, but they're not separate anymore. They're us. We're them. And together, we're diving deeper into mysteries that have no bottom, reaching for wonders that have no end, becoming the answer to a question the universe has been asking since the first atom learned to dance with light. Asterisk. Asterisk. The ocean remembers everything. Asterisk, asterisk. That's what I've learned in the decades since my transformation. Every molecule of water carries memory of ancient seas, of extinct species, of worlds that existed before continents had names. And now, through the abyssal, through the network that connects us all, I can read those memories like pages in a book written in salt and pressure and time. But memory isn't the gift I thought it would be. It's a burden, a warning. 50 years after the first transformation, the ocean showed me something that changed everything again. I was swimming in the Mariana Trench with a pod of transformed humans and several hundred abyssal, when we felt a disturbance in the network, a signal that didn't originate from Earth, didn't come from any of the consortium worlds. It was older, colder, and it was screaming. The abyssal reacted instantly, their forms solidifying into defensive geometries I'd never seen before. Through our connection, I felt their fear not for themselves, but for what was coming. The architects who'd seeded life across the universe hadn't just left gifts, they'd left guardians, watchers, mechanisms designed to evaluate each species that accepted the transformation, to determine if they were worthy of joining the galactic consciousness or if they represented a threat that needed to be eliminated. We had been judged, and we had been found. Complicated. The Watcher arrived 3 months later, appearing simultaneously in Earth's orbit and in the deepest trenches of every ocean. It wasn't a ship or a creature, it was a concept made physical, a mathematical proof that could think and act and decide. It manifested as a sphere of impossible darkness, surrounded by rings of light that existed in spectrums our enhanced eyes could barely process. When it spoke, it didn't use sound. It rewrote the laws of physics in localized areas to create meaning directly in our minds. Humanity's transformation had proceeded too quickly, it said. 3 billion people in 50 years. Unprecedented in the history of seeded worlds. Most species took millennia to reach such numbers, allowing time for cultural integration, for philosophical adaptation, for the unchanged and changed to find equilibrium. We had rushed. And in rushing, we had created instability. On Earth, tensions between transformed and unchanged humans had erupted into violence in some regions. Ideological factions formed, some believing transformation should be mandatory, others that it was an abomination. The Watcher had identified 17,000 potential timeline branches, where humanity's transformation led to civil war, planetary devastation, or the extinction of either the changed or unchanged. The ultimatum was simple and horrifying. Humanity would be given one generation 30 years to prove we could coexist peacefully in our dual state. If we succeeded, we would be welcomed fully into the consortium, given access to technologies and knowledge that would elevate us beyond anything we'd imagined. If we failed, the Watcher would sterilize the transformation. Every transformed human would be reverted to their original state. The Abyssal would be returned to dormancy for another billion years. The seeds would remain, but we would forget they ever awakened. Voss called it the trial of unity. The consortium called it the proving. I called it impossible. How do you force unity? How do you make people accept each other when fear runs deeper than reason? The unchanged looked at us and saw their obsolescence. The transformed looked at the unchanged and felt frustration at their refusal to evolve. Both sides were human. Both sides were right. Both sides were doomed if we couldn't bridge the gap. I proposed something radical. If I was the Genesis, the bridge between human and abyssal, then perhaps I could become a bridge between changed and unchanged. Using abilities I'd only barely explored, I began creating temporary transformations, allowing unchanged humans to experience the enhanced state for exactly 24 hours before reverting. They would feel what we felt, understand what we understood, but return to themselves afterward with memories intact. The program started small, volunteers only. Scientists, philosophers, religious leaders, people whose voices carried weight in unchanged communities. The first subject was a woman named Dr. Sarah Chen, a geneticist who'd spent decades arguing against transformation on ethical grounds. She was skeptical, hostile even, as the abyssal surrounded her and began the process. 24 hours later, she emerged from the ocean, weeping. Not from horror, but from understanding. She'd felt the network, touched minds across light years, experienced existence in dimensions that made time feel like a suggestion rather than a law. And crucially, she'd felt her core identity remain intact throughout. When she reverted, she was still opposed to mandatory transformation. But she understood now why people chose it. And understanding, she said, was the seed of acceptance. The program expanded. Millions volunteered for temporary transformation. Not all came back, convinced some found the experience overwhelming, alien, disturbing. But they came back informed. They'd seen behind the curtain. They couldn't dismiss the transformed as monsters or fools anymore. They'd been there. They knew. Meanwhile, I worked with transformed communities to develop what we called anchors, ways to remain connected to unchanged humanity, to participate in their world without flaunting our differences. Transformed artists created works that unchanged people could appreciate on their own terms. Transformed scientists solved problems that benefited everyone. Climate restoration, disease eradication, asteroid deflection. We didn't just demonstrate our abilities, we demonstrated our humanity, but resistance remained. Fundamentalist groups on both sides, unchanged humans who viewed transformation as species suicide, transformed humans who saw the unchanged as evolutionary dead ends. They clashed in cities, on networks, in the corridors of power. The Watcher observed it all, its presence a constant reminder of the clock ticking down. 15 years into the trial, breakthrough came from an unexpected source. A child, born to one transformed and one unchanged parent. She was something neither a hybrid who could shift between states voluntarily. Her name was Kaya, and her existence proved that transformation wasn't a one-way door. It was a spectrum. She could be enhanced when she needed to be, and baseline when she chose to be. She was the answer we'd been searching for. Living proof that humanity didn't have to choose between evolution and identity. We could be both. The discovery changed everything. Scientists learned to replicate Kaya's condition, offering a third path, voluntary shifting between states. Within 5 years, 2 billion people had adopted the hybrid transformation. They could live as unchanged humans most of the time, but access enhanced abilities when needed. It was compromise, made cellular. It was unity written in DNA. The Watcher evaluated us in the 30th year, arriving again in every ocean simultaneously. The judgment took 3 days. 3 days, where every transformed, unchanged, and hybrid human held their breath. Through the network, I felt the Watcher sifting through billions of minds, examining countless timelines, calculating probabilities with computational power that made quantum computers look like abacuses. When the verdict came, it wasn't delivered to governments or leaders. It was delivered to everyone, simultaneously, directly into consciousness. Humanity had passed. Barely. We remained fractured, imperfect, struggling. But we were struggling together. We'd proven that transformation didn't mean abandonment, that evolution didn't require the sacrifice of those who chose different paths. The Watcher's final message was almost gentle. Humanity's greatest strength had always been our diversity, our ability to contain multitudes. The transformation had simply given us more ways to be diverse. The restrictions lifted. Full consortium membership was granted. Within days, the first human-designed ships left for other seeded worlds, carrying transformed, unchanged, and hybrid crew members working together. Within months, the first joint, human-alien colonies were established on ocean worlds, light years away. Within years, human art and music and literature were spreading across the galactic network, adding our unique voice to the cosmic choir. I stopped being the Genesis and became simply Marcus, a man who died in the deep ocean and been reborn into something more. Something that contained both the boy who dreamed of exploring the seas and the being who could swim between stars. The abyssals still follow me, but they follow everyone now. They're integrated into human society, partners and companions and fellow travelers on this strange journey. Sometimes I return to that vent, the one that started everything. It still glows with nameless light. But now I understand what it is, not just a source of transformation, but a question. A challenge issued billions of years ago by architects who wanted to see if life could transcend its origins, if consciousness could grow beyond the boundaries of single worlds, single forms, single definitions. We answered that question. Not perfectly, not completely, but honestly. We said yes to evolution without saying no to our humanity. We became more while remaining ourselves. The ocean remembers everything. And now, so do we. Every human who touches the network can access the memories of ancient Earth, of alien seas, of the first cells learning to dream. We carry that weight together, changed and unchanged alike, each contributing our piece to the vast puzzle of existence. I am no longer alone at the bottom of the ocean. But more importantly, humanity is no longer alone in the universe. We found family in the deep. We found purpose in transformation. We found unity in diversity. And the creatures born from that strange deep-sea vent, they don't just follow me anymore. They follow all of us. Because we're all Genesis now, every human who chooses to evolve, to grow, to become something more while honoring what we've been. The story isn't finished. Evolution never is. But we're writing the next chapter together, in water and starlight and the quantum foam between dimensions. And it's going to be beautiful.